Welcome back to Bobby's Brain Dump. Today, we're going to be looking at a man whose effect on the Roman Republic made it more powerful than ever, but also led to its demise. The changes that this one man would make would haunt the future Roman Empire for the rest of his existence. That man was Gaius Marius.
To buckle?
Gaius Marius was born in 157 BC in a town called Arpinum. The area he lived in had been conquered by the Romans 250 years beforehand. But they had been part of the Roman Republic for so long that they had citizenship by this point.
Nice.
Gaius himself had claimed that his father was a labourer and that he was born to poverty, which is entirely untrue. There's no way that a family can support somebody going into politics when they're not rich, especially in the Roman era. It requires a lot of money for campaigning and bribing and assassinations. His early life is relatively uneventful. When he was 23, Marius joined the legions, and this is kind of where his career really takes off. In 120 BC, Marius became a plebeian tribune, which is quite a powerful position. They have the ability to veto laws made by the Senate, and they're supposed to represent the plebeian class.
I thought we were an autonomous collective.
But that seemed to be the maximum extent of his political career. He ran for other elections for higher offices, and it all came to naught. His next big jump was as governor of further Spain, where he had a few minor military operations, but it was quite a wealthy province, and Marius came back with a lot of personal wealth.
Cha-ching!
Returning to Rome, he did one of the most important things he could for his career. He got married to a lovely woman named Julia, who happened to be part of a patrician family. This was a win-win. For the Julii, they got a wealthy young man who was on the rise, and for Gaius, he got the political legitimacy he'd been seeking. This supercharged Gaius' career. In 108 BC, Gaius would run for and win the consulship. Being consul was kind of like being the president, except you were expected to directly lead military forces, and there was 2 of you. He would go on to have 6 consecutive consulships, and then a 7th at the end of his life.
Nice.
The most important thing that Gaius did in his time as consul was to reform the legions. In what would be dubbed the Marian Reforms, Gaius made an effort to make the Roman military way more effective than it had been. So before the reforms, the legions were stratified by wealth. What you'd be doing in the military was basically governed by your tax code. It also meant that when you're serving in the military, all of your equipment had to be personally purchased. Now this created a problem because when you had a series of wars or you had a big military setback, your tax-paying base would start to wither, and you needed to start recruiting from somewhere else. So the first thing that Marius did was to expand recruitment to the landless masses, the people that had no taxable assets. Because they were poor, they wouldn't be able to afford their own equipment, so it was going to be necessary for the state to provide arms and armor. The second reform was that all soldiers were going to be on a contract. They were to be full-time soldiers for 16 years. And so if they weren't fighting, they were training. They weren't farmers that would pick up a sword. They weren't potters that would put on some armor. They were soldiers.
You, there. What is your profession?
I'm a potter.
The third reform was that soldiers would get basically retirement benefits. You'd get a plot of land in conquered territory, and your general would have to pay you a pension. Now, something else that kind of gets squared in with this, but something that was forced through, was that Italian allies that fought for Rome would also receive Roman citizenship. Marius would justify this by saying that it was too hard to distinguish between Romans on the battlefield and other Italians, and so it was just easier if everybody was Roman. One of the problems that Marius had was that throughout his political life, he had a habit of pissing everybody off. So when he was supported by the patricians, he blocked legislation that would allow them to meddle in elections, which made him popular with the plebeians. And then he went and blocked legislation that would expand the grain dole, making him unpopular with the plebeians. The man that supported Gaius' early military career was later exiled by Gaius, and then Marius snubbed Sulla, one of his subordinates who would later become his greatest rival, said to have an incurable hatred. And so by the end of it, you either loved Gaius or you hated Gaius. And the side that hated Gaius ended up winning. In 98 BC, Gaius Marius would exile himself after his 6th consulship. It wasn't until 87 BC that Gaius Marius would return at the head of an army. With his ally Cinna, they marched into Rome and started murdering all the leading supporters of Sulla. The following year, elections were held, and as you'd imagine, being in control of a number of legions in the city, he was elected to the consulship for a 7th time. He lasted about a fortnight and then he was dead. One of the lasting impacts of Gaius Marius's consulships was the new legion system, the idea of these professional soldiers that would be raised by a general, paid by a general, and ultimately equipped by a general. And so these soldiers a lot of the time didn't have loyalty to the state, they didn't have loyalty to the Senate, they had loyalty to their general. This created a situation where you would have prominent individuals that would be in charge of tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And anytime there was any sort of political instability, there was a risk that you were going to have a civil war, because you had several prominent people at the heads of very large armies that were all incredibly well trained. Marius was also directly responsible for the instability that would end the Republic. He would constantly overrule the Senate and push through any legislation that he wanted, which made a lot of the things he did quite unpopular. And this directly led to political violence, which wasn't unusual for Rome, but the scale of the political violence had gotten to an insane degree. Ultimately though, the most important thing was the creation of the legions, and they would directly benefit his nephew, a man who was little known, but we know him today as Julius Caesar, the great dictator of Rome. Anyway guys, that's the episode. The reason why I called this Prominent People is because I kind of like the joke that we can call it PP. But beyond that, if you see a video and it has a purple thumbnail, that means it's just a voice recording. If you prefer to see my beautiful face, those videos will be pink if it's something to do with current events, or green if it's something to do with history. Those ones will be a bit longer and a bit more in depth. I hope you liked it, and let me know what you think. If you like this format, that's cool. If you don't, then you don't. But if you did like it, drop a like so I can know that it is actually something you do want, or just drop a dislike so that I can see whether or not you like it or hate it. Let me know what you think, drop a comment, drop a like, and if you do like the content, subscribe, because I try to get something out every week. Anyway, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.